views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. Tonight we present our final debate of this political season. During this special Wednesday night edition of Bronxtalk, which is being seen live, we'll give you a chance to meet candidates who are running for the Democratic primary in the 77th Assembly District in the Bronx. This has been a vacant seat since Vanessa Gibson was elected to the City Council last fall. The 77th AD includes the West Bronx neighborhoods of University Heights, Highbridge, Morris Heights, Claremont Park, as well as areas along the Harlem River down to 149th Street. Now, there are 4 candidates running in this race, and truthfully, I can't believe I'm saying this, but yet again, we have 2 empty seats. Latoya Joyner and Carlton Curry have elected to not be here. Ms. Joyner's campaign manager told me she has other things to do tonight. We offered to change the time and even the date of the debate, but there was no interest. And Mr. Curry called us just as I was coming into the studio tonight to tell us that he was at a doctor's appointment and was not going to be able to make it. The 2 of them join a rogues list of candidates who have decided not to be part of this program, and that list includes Pedro Espada Jr., Jose Rivera, Hector Ramirez, who did it twice, believe it or not, Charlie Rangel, Fernando Cabrera, and just last week, Marsha Michael, George Alvarez, and Lenita Jones. I am at a loss to explain why any candidate would want to run for office and then turn down the opportunity to present their candidacy to the voters on primetime television in their hometown. To me, it speaks to the worst of our political process. But for the best of our political process, we have 2 fine alternatives who are here with us tonight. We're thankful for their participation. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Verdell Mack. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And also Charisse Palomino. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We don't take phone calls during debates, but you can send us comments via email to bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or on our Facebook page, and we read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Now, candidates, here are the rules. We'll ask a question to one candidate who will respond, leading to a free-flowing discussion on the subject, with the original respondent having the final word. The questions include those submitted by the candidates themselves. Each of you will have an opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement at the end of the program. Again, thank you both for your participation. By prior agreement, the first question to you, Reverend Mack. On the 20 years that I've hosted this program, the question of what to do with our young people, how to keep them productively occupied and out of trouble, has probably come up more than any other subject. So, in this very challenging time, what to do with our young people? How do we keep them productively occupied and out of trouble?
That's a very simple question, because through the ages we all have had to raise children and help them develop in our society. We have to hold their interests. When children are young, that's when they absorb and learn the most. We have to tune in to their talents and their skills, as well as help them develop those skills and talents we don't know about by keeping up with the modern changes in time. Because children modernize with the time. Like, this is an age of technology. I can't sit a kid down in a classroom now and tell him to read a book. He'll get bored. Technology needs to be there because their interests are in technology.
Do you want to respond to that, and we can go back and forth?
Yes,
or
I
add more
do.
to it?
For the past 5.5 years, I've been working with young people in our community, and there's so many things that need to take place in order to keep our young people out of trouble. We have to look at how we engage them in the education process. We also need to make sure that we have safe spaces for them, that there's enough funding for after-school programs, and that after-school programs are not limited in how many kids they can reach. So we need to make sure that there's enough funding for after-school programs, that there's enough community-based organizations that can offer after-school programs and offering after-school programs that keep the young people's interest. We can't just have one-dimensional programming. We need to have programs that focus on academic enrichment. We need to have programs that focus on recreation, that teach them skills like sexual health programs, nutrition programs, life skills programs. There's a lot of things that we can do, and in the state assembly, this is an opportunity for my colleagues and I, once I get elected, to be able to allocate funding to New York City so that we can provide after-school programs through DYCD, and as well as making sure that we are not only working in the schools, but also engaging parents so that there's a stronger and more parental involvement, especially as the kids get older.
Thank you. You know, I'll ask kind of a follow-up that you both can address. The notion of funding comes up. How do you do it during very economically stressed times when, frankly, the first thing that gets cut is youth programs and after-school programs and things like that? It's very nice to talk about all the things you want to do. How do we do that?
We do that through our community. It takes a community to raise a child. As a leader of a faith-based organization, beside my husband for more than 20 years, we have had to reach out into the community and create activities and arts program, because that has been out of our school system in New York for a long time. We have dancing, singing. I ran a summer program where we taught English as a second language. Along with the religious teaching, we have an obligation to ensure that our children are well-rounded. One of the new things that I want to introduce in our community is teaching children economic value. I think that children need to understand how to manage money and how to deal with money, how to save money. So I've designed a developmental class dealing with economics to teach our children how to balance their checkbooks. I've talked with one of the banks in the community to open an account with them, show them how to do deposits and withdrawals and manage their money.
Do you want to respond to that or add something to it?
Well, to get back on topic about addressing funding,
yes.
On the state level, when it comes to the state budget, there's a lot of tough decisions that have to be made.
Yes.
And we have to really think about long term when we look at budgets. We spend so much money on incarcerating young people and incarceration in general. If we make the investment in our youth, we don't have to spend that money later on. So we need to think about how to best utilize the funding that we do have in New York State budget.
Okay, you get the final word here. Did you want to add one more
The
thing?
final word, I would like to say that we have always had money through Title I and through other programs for our young people. But the key is to capture their attention in things that they're interested in. If we don't capture their attention and they become bored, then we lose them. We have to hold them through creativity and modern approach to the academic.
Ms. Palomino, in June you called on the Rent Guidelines Board to freeze rents. While I'm sure
Yes.
all candidates and most of the ones we've had on our program are interested in supporting tenants and tenants' rights, if you deny property owners a chance to pay for their ever-growing expenses, won't this come back to bite tenants as needed repairs and other services would get neglected even further?
No, I don't think so. I think that when we talk about when we look at the last several years when it comes to the rent guidelines, there's been a dramatic increase in rent, and tenants have felt that. And there has to be a balance in being able to afford a place to live. And we've heard the landlords and discuss about that they need the increases to be able to afford their expenses, but at what cost? And that's where some of the tough decisions have to be made. Do we price people out of their own home? Do we price people out of their own community so that landlords can make repairs that in so many buildings, these repairs have not been addressed for years and the rents have been going up for years. So for a lot of the tenants that I was working with when we were organizing and pushing for the rent freeze, one of the things that we talked about was how it just felt like it was an excuse by the landlords to say we can't afford to not increase the rent. Salaries aren't going up, but rents are going up, and people are being priced out of their own home. In our district alone, the average cost for a one-bedroom apartment is $454. The median income is $27,000. Once you pay taxes and once you pay your living expenses, how do you survive? So we have to, when we look at economics, we can't just look one-sided. We have to look at the people who are suffering as a consequence.
Thank you. Ms. Mack, Affordable Housing and the Rent Guidelines Board?
I think that there is a lot of waste in our system when it comes down to affordable housing. And I think that the system needs to be overhauled. For one, we look at the Bronx and there's a lot of development going on in the Bronx. Developers come in and there are community benefit agreements that are designed around these developers. But these community benefits that are designed, or agreements that are designed, doesn't really take in account that this is a low income housing area. What they do is they give us a few token apartments, and then people who can afford the higher apartments, because they want to get the money that they invest back, okay, then after a point in time, these people get ousted out of their homes.
I mean, you've basically defined the notion of gentrification, and that's
And gentrification is very important, but it's not applicable if it doesn't apply to the needs of the community.
And we have to focus on.
Final word here.
We have to focus on, preserving the affordable housings that we have now and making sure that we're creating housing that people can afford to live in. So many people in our community are living paycheck to paycheck, and so many people in the community, for so many of the residents in the 77th district, we spend half of our income or more than half of our income just on rent alone. And so we have to really redefine what's considered affordable housing, because if you're spending 50% of your disposable income on rent, that's not affordable.
I was a bit remiss before we started the formal questioning. I didn't give each of you a chance to just comment on the fact that Mr. Curry said he was still at the doctor's office, and that Ms. Joyner said she had something else to do. So I'll just give you a moment. Do you have any thoughts on the fact that we have two empty chairs here tonight?
Well, it shows a degree of commitment to letting the voters know where they stand on issues and what is their political platform. I feel like the voters need to know where you stand and to hear you discuss it and talk about it so they can get a feel for who you are as a person. And I think that's very important.
Obviously, because you're here. Ms. Palomino, your thought?
Yes, I mean, Reverend Mack and I have been the only two candidates out of 4 who've attended all 3 public debates, and I think that says a lot about the seriousness and the commitment that we're making towards our candidacy for the State Assembly. We have an obligation as candidates to discuss with the community where we stand. We have an obligation to hear the community, to listen to their concerns, and have their voices be heard. Because ultimately, if we're not listening to them, how do we fairly represent them? And I think your absence in the community, when you're absent in the community, how can we expect you to be present in Albany?
Let's get back to our questioning. Ms. Mack, 2 upstate senators rather famously said they'd put aside their personal beliefs and religious convictions and ultimately voted for gay marriage because they said from a legal and legislative point of view, they couldn't oppose it. You're the First Lady of the Gospel Hill Baptist Church. With moral issues like Women's Equality Act and a woman's right to choose on the table, what criteria will you use when you comes time to evaluate your vote?
I think a woman's choice is very important. And I think that choice is hers alone. And I think the Women's Equality Act is very important in protecting that choice. Because if that choice is not protected, there are so many women who find themselves in a situation that will go underground. A lot of our young people as well. And when that happens, there could be devastating consequences. I personally know of 2 young people who made that choice because they couldn't, who went down that road because they didn't have the freedom of choice and their families lost them. I think freedom of choice is very important.
Your thought on that issue?
I'm happy you brought it up because I've been an advocate for women's rights, and I'm a Planned Parenthood advocate, and we went to Albany last year as well as this year, and we advocated and pushed for the passage of the Women's Equality Act, which still hasn't been passed. No. which shamefully hasn't been passed. And the problem is there's people who are making decisions because of the abortion provision that they're denying so many other elements of the Women's Equality Act. It's more than an issue of choice. It's about fair pay for the same work, equal pay for equal work. It's about protecting women who have been victims of domestic violence from housing discriminations, amongst other issues. And when you're a legislator in Albany, you're going to make tough decisions. You're going to have decisions where you have to think about you have to vote your conscience. But you can't compromise the greater good for your personal choices.
Okay,
Absolutely.
you get the final word here.
I agree with my opponent. You can't, sacrifice the greater good for your personal choices. Being the Assemblywoman for the 77th District doesn't mean my personal choice. It means that I advocate for the people, something that I have been doing for over 21 years in many aspects. Women's rights, the Farm Bill, so many other things that I've advocated for in our community. So it's very important that we think about those that we serve, not ourselves.
Candidates, let's talk about development. This is such an important time in the Bronx and throughout the city and throughout the nation when it comes to developmental projects. A few months ago, the borough president released a special Harlem River Waterfront Districts plan, hailing it as a way for the Bronx to duplicate the successes at Brooklyn Bridge Park along the waterfront between 138th Street and 149th Street at the Harlem River. Do you like the plan? Is it a good way to make good on the promise of a revitalized waterfront at the Gateway Mall in the Harlem River?
I think it's a good idea to want to revitalize the Bronx for a number of reasons. It's an opportunity to bring some jobs, some construction jobs, although that's not sufficient enough to address the the unemployment levels in the Bronx. But I think it's really important that we do have some revitalization. And when we look at the plan, we need to make sure that there's mixed income housing available and that people who live in the community can remain in the community and not be priced out of the new developments that are coming to the Bronx. We can't focus on adding new developments to the Bronx and then neglect the residents who are now being priced out of their own communities.
Your thoughts, Reverend Mack?
My thoughts in reference to the memorandum of understanding that the borough president made is that I disagree with it. The gentrification is good, as I stated before, when it's in the common interest of the people. And I don't feel that the memorandum is. That memorandum entails a company coming into an area where there's a high asthma count with our children currently, bringing in trucks. That's going to add to the now congested Cross Bronx Expressway that we have. It's going to deteriorate our air quality. Okay? Then it provides for what they call full-time equate job positions. What do they mean by that? It's non-union and it doesn't rise to the cost of living wages.
Okay, you get the final word here, ma'am.
I think it's important that when we look at new developments and new projects, that they do have an economic advantage for the residents in the community, that when there are development jobs, that residents have access to them. There's the controversy with Fresh Direct where people are complaining again about the air quality and bringing in the Fresh Direct. But we need to also really look at making sure that people in the community have access and that there's inclusion, so that when we do bring in the housing component of this plan, that people in the community can continue to live in their own community and they can be a part of this new revitalization.
Let's talk education, Reverend Mack. Every candidate thinks they have the best ideas, and I've interviewed many of them, and I've heard them all here on this show. So I'm going to ask it as a general question. Common Core, charter schools, teacher tenure, the controller is concerned about the UPK contracts. You tell me, how are we going to improve the schools in the 77th Assembly District?
Well, we have to look basically at school performances. I think Common Core is very good. It's very new to the district right now. As you know, it was just introduced with the last school system. So the teachers have to get antiquated and well adjusted to the new system more and be able to present it in a positive way. And the children as well have to get used to it. The children are introduced to something new as well, and they're struggling with it. But one of the shortcomings, I think, in all of our schools that affects the performance of our school is a lack of technology. Okay, we need to improve the technology in our school so teacher can have the resources that they need to teach the Common Core curriculum, and children have the resources that they need to deal with the Common Core curriculum. Most schools out of our district have computers for their children. Our children are not given computers. How can a child work without access to an internet? And most of the computers that are in the school, from being a PA president, I know are most of the time non-operative. And the libraries are short on resources in terms of books and technology. That needs to improve.
I'm just going to follow up then, and it's really a similar question to what I asked before, and that is about funding. So it's very nice to say, well, we want to wire all the schools. How do we come up with the funding, especially when the fight in Albany has always been about, cutting back, and we don't have the budget for these kinds of things?
I can't say that we don't have the budget for those kinds of things, but I know that look at the monies that just was made available for kindergarten and for PK. Where did that just finally drop from? It didn't drop from the air. The funds are there. And if we go back to the fresh direct question, we are giving them $128 million. We are giving them, they're not bringing that to us. We are giving them out of city and state funds. So some of those funds could be used for something like education.
Your thoughts?
I think there's a lot of things that we need to do when it comes to addressing education. And when we look at Common Core, it's changed how kids are supposed to be taught. Prior to Common Core, the standard was here, and then Common Core raised it here. And now there's an achievement gap. There was achievement gap prior to Common Core, and the achievement gap is greater, and we have to bridge that gap. When we talk about education, we have to create programs and initiatives that can bridge the achievement gap for our young people. Their zip code shouldn't dictate how far they go in life, and we know that how much education you go determines how much education you achieve determines how far you can go. And so we need to make sure that when we talk about education for our kids, that parents are included, that parents have a say in education, that it's a more inclusive process, and we can't just limit it to, some charter schools. I mean, charter schools work for those who are lucky enough to get in. But there's this huge debate on charter schools, but when we spend time in arguing about charter schools, we continue to neglect the public schools that are not performing well. There's an elementary school in our district, PS 73, that is below the 10% of the students are performing at grade level. That's not acceptable.
Reverend Mack, you get the final question, final response on this, then we'll have one more question. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't think charter schools has anything to do with the funding, and parents have always been involved. That has been something both channelers, our previous and the current channeler, has encouraged within the school, open school environment. But when you go into the environment, which I have been in the environment, you see that there are more things that the teachers as well as the principals need. A lot of the principals are overloaded. A lot of the schools are overcrowded, okay? So I think that we need to look at the allocations of funds and what we do with those funds in terms of education. Yes, Common Core is a higher standard academically, but our children can come up to par if they're given the materials that they need.
I'll give you each 30 seconds on this question because we're just about out of time. Access to good food, access to healthy food is an issue in the 77th and in many districts in our borough of the Bronx. It's obviously the fundamental baseline for health care. How do we increase access to healthy food for people in the 77th AD?
We need to, the New York City Department of Health had some really great programs that they were implementing. Like they had a program called Adopt a Bodega or Adopt a Shop, where young people would go in and they would redesign, move the unhealthy foods and push them back and put fruits and vegetables there. And then they would put the water at eye level and the sodas at the bottom. And they would, encourage people to go and buy healthier foods. We need to, when it comes to access, it's not just about access.
We've got to get you quickly because I have to move on. Go ahead. Did you want
it's not just about access. It's about nutrition education and making sure that people know,
Great. We'll give you the same 30 seconds on that question.
Okay, it's about nutritional education, and the New York City in-state has a lot of programs with the health department. One, we just certified a lot of people to teach people about nutritional health. We do cook shop, and we educate the children along with the parents on healthy eating and healthy foods and how to prepare them and teach them how it affects their bodies.
If we had more time, we'd have more time for answers like these, but we're now at the point where we're going to ask you each for a 1-minute closing statement. By prior agreement, Reverend Mack, you get the first closing statement. 1 minute.
First of all, I want to thank you for being here tonight so that I could speak on my platform. But I want to say to the people of the 77th District of the Bronx, I have been an advocate and a servant to you for over 21 years. You know better than most people do all the things I have done. I've worked with your children, I've taught you, I've fed you, and I've advocated to you on all of the issues that address you. Your housing, your health reform, and I've worked with the Farm Bill, I work with women's rights, and I will continue to work hard and struggle in assisting you in making our community the best community in the Bronx.
Thank you very much, Reverend Verdell Mack. And Cherise Palomino, you have 60 seconds as well.
I'm going to ask the voters to vote for me because a vote for Palomino is a vote for our progress. I have been a champion and an advocate for this community for years. I've been an advocate on the Bronx Transportation Alternative Activist Committee, so I've done advocacy with public health, with public safety. I've done advocacy with housing, and I work with young people, and I've done sexual health advocacy and education advocacy, and I will continue to take those same skills and that same advocacy to stand up, speak loud, and be a strong leader in Albany for our community. I will fight for our community, and I think that I'm the best to lead our community, and I ask that you vote for me because a vote for Palomino is a vote for our progress.
Reverend Verdell Mack and Cherise Palomino, thank you both so much for joining us. We're so sorry others didn't see the importance of it, but we certainly appreciate that both of you did. And I'm sure that all the candidates will agree with me when I remind voters, whoever you're voting for, please come out and vote on primary day Tuesday, September 9th. Please note that tonight, Wednesday, September 3rd, because of the importance of the upcoming primary, we will rerun our debate for the 34th Senatorial District from 2 weeks ago with Oliver Capella and Jeff Klein right after this program. Then at 9 p.m., our regularly scheduled program with the candidates in the 79th AD. Thanks to producer Dalia Gonzalez and director Shirley Arrieta. And thanks to you. Don't forget, get out and vote. See you next week. Good night.
Thank you.
I already knew that I was going to go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science. After that, I'm going to get my law degree. Then I'm going to come back to Detroit, boost the economy, become the mayor or something, try to make the situation better for other people. I feel like I owe it to the city. I'm determined. It's going to happen. My name is Justin.